So we last studied the Assyrian time period, especially concentrating on the scarlet-colored beast of Revelation 17, its rise. The horns, Communism, began to rise in 1929, we learned. But the rest of the beast has not yet come to fruition, as we are still in the Assyrian phase, also known as the Leopard-like beast phase. As you know, this is chart 13, it takes us through world history represented by strange beasts. The unnatural features in the first three beasts actually numbers them. We have Babylon as the first worldwide kingdom, but second from creation. The antediluvian world is actually first, therefore Babylon is the second kingdom, hence the two wings on the lion. Medo-Persia is represented as the bear with three ribs in its mouth, numbering it as the third universal kingdom. Then we have the four-headed leopard beast that represents Grecia with four wings, designating it the fourth kingdom worldwide. After Grecia, we then notice a change in the appearance of the beast when we get to the fifth beast that represents Rome. This is because between Grecia and Rome lies a dividing line as it separates the typical period from the anti-typical period. We know Christ came in the time of Rome and fulfilled many of the types in the sacrificial system, but there are more lessons to be learned from the types, as we will see in the Christian dispensation. Now, Rome is represented as a nondescript beast, which treads down the true saints of God in two stages, which we will see when it morphs into the nondescript beast with the horned head. These two beasts are actually one beast in two stages. This simply shows how Rome morphed and changed from a heathen government to a religious church-state government in its second phase, which brings us down to the time period that we are living in. The leopard-like beast is a composite beast with the feet of a bear, body like a leopard, mouth of a lion, showing that it's descended from the previous worldwide kingdoms. The 10 horns are back, as church and state are now separate, and they now have crowns. The heads, 7 in number, represent the Christian churches, while the horns represent civil powers universally, hence the number 10, the same as the 10 toes. This leopard-like beast brings us to the world of today, the time period we are living in. The papacy is represented by the wounded head only. Let's talk briefly about this. The 1884 version of Great Controversy calls this beast earthly governments, while later versions simply describe it as the papacy. But when we look back at the beast in totality, we can see that 4 beasts are listed in Daniel, that is Babylon, Medo-Persia, Grecia, and Rome, while the next 2 are found in Revelation 13 and 17. Daniel 7, Revelation 13, and 17 provide the beasts that represent world history. The United States is also represented in that lineup as a 2-horned beast because of its involvement in the last day events. If we count the worldwide kingdoms, keeping in mind that the biblical number 7 means complete, we can see that there are 7 worldwide kingdoms from creation. Number 1 is the antediluvian world, 2nd, Babylon, 3rd, Medo-Persia, 4th, Grecia, 5th, Rome, 6th would be the world of today, the leopard-like beast, and 7 would be the future world. So when we look at the leopard-like beast, we can see that the papacy represents the wounded head only, and the rest of Christendom is represented by the other heads. Additionally, As it is in the world of today, the churches, the heads, are subject to the governments, the horns. With this understanding, we can properly decode current and future events in prophecy. Now we will go over the attributes of antitypical Assyria. We will see that it represents the Protestant nations, with the capital city being Nineveh, the USA. We will also touch on antitypical Babylon, the next worldwide power, which is the modern counterpart of ancient Babylon. This is just confirmation that in the Christian dispensation, history is repeating itself, we will see, only on a much broader scale. So we know that we're still in the Assyrian time period, as the gigantic war surrounding Jerusalem has not taken place, and neither has the last king of the north come to his end. Now, we may be seeing the beginning of this gigantic war, and this war that's happening with Israel. It just hasn't expanded to the extent that we're looking for. Towards the end of the Assyrian phase, we know that there will be a few major key things that must occur. There will be a confederacy set up by the United States, the time of the Isaiah 8, in the Assyrian phase. The first man, 666, will be revealed. A wicked counselor will be revealed. And remember, only God's true people will recognize the man 666. No one else will. A time of trouble occurs, called Jacob's time of trouble, which includes a death decree for the saints. So there are some things that may occur during the transition period of the leopard-like beast, like the special resurrection and the kingdom being set up. But back to the entrance of the scarlet-colored beast. Once the United States loses this war, the next world war power to come on the scene is represented by the woman and the scarlet-colored beast. From current events, we can already tell that communistic Russia is taking the lead amongst communistic totalitarian governments. They have formed BRICS to create an alternative world currency and trading system that is not dependent on the dollar. If the US loses the dollar status as the world reserve currency, a huge depression in the US is predicted by financial analysts. And this is Russia's aim, amongst other things. Nations across the globe are joining BRICS. Russia is also forgiving debt in all third world countries they have invested in, solidifying their ties with them. Russia supplies weapons to all enemies of the United States in proxy wars. Why? They are preparing for war and they want to win. They are working behind the scenes and in plain daylight to emerge as the next world power. And remember, there are two ideologies at war here. And we have the Western Bloc and we have the Eastern Bloc. And the Western Bloc believes in democratic governments, while the Eastern Bloc, Russia's allies, believe in more of a totalitarian or communistic government. So these two ideologies clash, and it's played out in all these wars that happen around the world. Besides many of the recent wars since World War II, we have the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Afghanistan War, and even guerrilla warfare in Cuba, Nicaragua, and other countries like the Congo. Russia and the US are always in conflict, providing weapons, financial, and political support to opposing regimes around the world that support their ideology. But the coming war is a gigantic war that will be centered around Jerusalem. This will be the war where the proxy fighting ceases and these two superpowers actually engage in war directly. Plus, according to Zechariah 14:1, every nation will be involved. So the war we will see in Jerusalem will actually be World War II resumed. The Cold War with Russia will soon become red hot with the US and its allies, and the Protestant nations on one side and the communistic Russian allies on the other.
America's Last War, the gigantic war of Zechariah 14 and Nahum 1, 2, and 3.
If there's anything the people of God need, it's present truth. Present truth lightens the way. It opens up the prophecies so we can understand events in our generation in the near future. So we need to understand this gigantic war that will take place in the Holy Land. To do this, we must first understand the leopard-like beast, who it is in prophecy, and when it started rising to power. It is found in Revelation 13. Let's read.
And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds, and tongues, and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword, and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666.
Now there are so many things to unpack here, but to do so, we need to review when the leopard-like beast started rising. In short, it rises as Rome is in its second stage. Rome, while it has the horned head, represents the ecclesiastical church-state government, the papacy. What happened that changed the world into the present world we see today versus the papal Roman world of yesterday? Well, it was the Protestant Reformation, the rise and return of a Bible-based religion. At this time, the Protestants are gaining access to the Bible, translating it to various languages, and rediscovering the gospel after 1260 years of papal oppression. So, it is the Lutherans, the Presbyterians, the Methodists, the Baptists, and the Adventists who protested to bring back fundamental Bible doctrines to the Christian church. These churches gave rise to the greatest nation on earth, the United States. Remember, it is because of the Protestant Reformation that we have countries with religious freedom, democracy, and human rights. So the leopard-like beast brings us out of papal supremacy and into the rule of the Protestant nations. This is depicted by the deadly wound being inflicted on one of the 7 heads, the papacy. So there's some overlap between the leopard-like beast and the hornhead beast, that is, between the rule of papal Rome and the rule of the Protestant nations, as it represents both periods of time. The time before the wound was inflicted, while papal supremacy was ruling, and the time after, when the Protestant Reformation started and began to inflict damage on that papal supremacy. But it also represents the time after the wound is healed. We can tell that this beast shares the same period of time as the hornhead beast because its 42 prophetic months that are shown in Revelation 13 verses 5 through 7 is the same as the period of time described for the hornhead beast in Daniel 7 verses 20 and 25, a time and times and the dividing of time. In biblical prophecy, a time equals 1 year. Times in the plural represents 2 years. Half of a time equals 6 months. If we give 30 days to a month, 12 months to a year, that equals 1,260 prophetic days. In Daniel's vision, the question was asked, how long shall it be to the end of these wonders? The answer is that it shall be for a time, 1 year, times 2 years, and a half time, half year. If we use God's appointed calculation in Ezekiel 4 and in Numbers, where he gives man a day for each year to represent time, we can know that this equals the 1,260-year period of papal oppression. So the prophetic period points back to papal supremacy and the persecution of God's people from 538 AD to 1798 AD. And this is also brought forth in Revelation 12:6, Revelation 14, and in Revelation 13:5, as we just read. In Daniel 7, the hornhead beast wears out the saints. And in Revelation 13, the leopard-like beast wars against the saints. But how can we know for sure that we are in the time of the leopard-like beast and that it represents the present world? Because the deadly wound is not yet fully healed. As soon as it is healed, all the world will wonder after the beast. Let's read it again.
And I saw one of his heads, as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast.
Notice in verse 11, then the United States comes into the prophecy.
And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed.
So, the United States is actually foremost in causing the world to worship the leopard-like beast when its deadly wound is healed. Let's read a statement from the pen of Sister White to solidify this assertion.
I saw that the 2-horned beast had a dragon's mouth, and that his power was in his head, and that the decree would go out of his mouth. Then I saw the mother of harlots, that the mother was not the daughters, but separate and distinct from them. She has had her day, and it is past, and her daughters, the Protestant sects, were the next to come on the stage and act out the same mind that the mother had when she persecuted the saints. I saw that as the mother has been declining in power, the daughters had been growing, and soon they will exercise the power once exercised by the mother.
So, The healing of the wound on the leopard-like beast is different from the scarlet-colored beast in Revelation 17, in which the woman rides. Detail by detail, we are thus enabled to see that the healing of the wound is indicative not only of the churches failing to carry the Protestant Reformation to completion, but also of the world's governments soon reverting to the despotic principles of the Dark Ages, to the rule of action before the wound was inflicted. This repetition of the past is to be brought about by the two-horned beast. When the time of the scarlet-colored beast fully arrives, a time in which communism is the dominant world power, the apostate system of worship, the woman riding the beast, goes worldwide. This is reflected in Ellen White's writings about the role of the United States in both phases. She writes,
"When the leading churches of the United States, uniting upon such points of doctrine as are held by them in common, shall influence the state to enforce their decrees and to sustain their institutions, then Protestant America will have formed an image of the Roman hierarchy, and the infliction of civil penalties upon dissenters will inevitably result."
In Testimonies for the Church, Volume 6, page 18, she writes,
"As America, the land of religious liberty, shall unite with the papacy in forcing the conscience and compelling men to honor the false Sabbath, the people of every country on the globe will be led to follow her example."
Now, these are two different time periods, two different phases. One follows after the other. First, it happens in the United States, and then it goes worldwide. But there will be a transition period in between the point where it's in the United States, the government is changed, the Constitution is repudiated, meaning it's thrown out, and the time where it goes worldwide, where the United States influences the world at the period of the scarlet-colored beast to go ahead and accept this apostate system of worship. So there's an unknown space of time between the localized oppression in the United States and the period of the image of the beast when it goes worldwide. Naturally, before the United States takes this church-state model of government to the rest of the world, they will try it out on their own citizens and in their own land.
The end acts of the leopard-like beast.
What needs to be understood is that during this time, a gigantic war is to take place in Israel, which will cause the United States to seek to build this church-state confederacy. The conditions that this war brings about throughout the world precipitate this drastic action. The United States and its allies will build a coalition to win the war, and they decide to unite the churches with the state. But they will not win this war no matter how hard they try, because God is not with such actions. This war is found in Zechariah 14.
For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle.
More on this later. Let's go back to the Confederacy. The Confederacy we are discussing is found in Isaiah 8, chapters 9 through 15. Let's read it.
Associate yourselves, O ye people, and ye shall be broken in pieces. And give ear, all ye of far countries. Gird yourselves, and ye shall be broken in pieces. Gird yourselves, and ye shall be broken in pieces. Take counsel together, and it shall come to naught. Speak the word, and it shall not stand, for God is with us. For the Lord spake thus to me with a strong hand, and instructed me that I should not walk in the way of this people, saying, Say ye not, a confederacy, to all them to whom this people shall say, a confederacy. Neither fear ye their fear, nor be afraid. Sanctify the Lord of hosts himself, and let him be your fear, and let him be your dread. And he shall be for a sanctuary, but for a stone of stumbling, and for a rock of offense to both the houses of Israel, for a gin and for a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And many among them shall stumble, and fall, and be broken, and be snared, and be taken.
In these verses, the Adventist church is identified with the pronoun them. Say ye not a confederacy to all them, to all Adventists, that this people, the people who are for the confederacy, are saying a confederacy. God is saying, do not let their fear be your fear, but cause all to fear God. God is not with this confederacy of churches and state officials. Why? Because they will uphold a false system of worship. The Protestants bled and died for religious freedom, but with this act of confederation, their sacrifices will be signally betrayed by their children or descendants. This confederacy will oppress God's saints, the saints who keep the Sabbath, but God is with his saints. This will be a great time of trouble for those in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. As the churches are sought by the U.S. government for this confederacy, they will also seek the participation of the Adventist Church in this union. But we have been counseled not to join, as we know it will lead to the restriction of liberties and the Sunday law. On the surface, it will appear to be a good thing, as the national reforms are religious in nature. This will cause some in the church to be for the joining of the Seventh-day Adventist Church into the Confederacy. But those who understand the sure word of prophecy will contest with their wayward brethren, warning them not to join. This will cause a shaking in the church, as those who heed the testimonies of God's Spirit, the Spirit of prophecy, will resist and protest this union of the church with the state. At this time, false brethren will be the most effective agents to betray their faithful brethren in the church. Let's read a statement from The Great Controversy, page 608. As the storm approaches, a large class who have professed faith in the third angel's message, but have not been sanctified through obedience to the truth, abandon their position and join the ranks of the opposition. By uniting with the world and partaking of its spirit, they have come to view matters in nearly the same light. And when the test is brought, they are prepared to choose the easy, popular side. Men of talent and pleasing address who once rejoiced in the truth employ their powers to deceive and mislead souls. They become the most bitter enemies of their former brethren. When Sabbath keepers are brought before the courts to answer for their faith, these apostates are the most efficient agents of Satan to misrepresent and accuse them, and by false reports and insinuations to stir up the rulers against them. This is why a separation, a judgment, to sweep away the wicked in the church has to occur. It must happen to save the church, as the false brethren outnumber the true. This is the time spoken of in Ezekiel 9, a time of judgment where men or angels with destroying weapons cut down the wicked in the church, much like the Passover of old. Now, this is not actually done by human beings. This is a supernatural separation of the wheat and tares. Even though the Bible uses the verbiage men, we're talking about angels. For a full explanation on the judgment, the separation of the wheat and tares in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, please watch our video, Who will purify the church, God or Satan? On our YouTube channel, Salem, GADSDA. The separation of the wheat and tares must occur because of this disastrous time, and the wicked are raptured, taken from the church. This causes the devil to come down with great fury on those who remain, inspiring those in power by a wicked counselor to institute a death decree and Sunday law to force the will. This is also known as the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. See Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 7. We are promised by this verse to be delivered from the trouble. The saints will be delivered as they cry day and night to God, and then, by miraculous means, they will be brought to the kingdom, an ark of safety. So the war is happening simultaneously as Jacob goes through his time of trouble. Ellen White says, when the four winds are let go, Christ sets up his kingdom. But first, let's go back to the gigantic war and learn of the message God has specifically for Assyria, which we will see are the Protestant nations, and Nineveh, the USA. So God is addressing the Protestant nations in prophecy. He calls them Assyria in books like Zephaniah and Nahum. If you look closely at these prophecies, you will see that they have never been fulfilled. In fact, there are clues throughout the scriptures that they are for specifically the last days. For instance, Zephaniah 1, 2, and 3 is a continuous letter to multiple groups about the Holy Land. In chapter 2, verse 1, God talks to the Jews who are currently gathering in that land, calling them the nation not desired. He also talks to the Arabs, calling them Moab and Ammon, saying he will bring judgment against them. Finally, God talks to his church, Judah, revealing them as his true people, the people who worship him in spirit and in truth. Now we will explain briefly how and why the Christian church is called Judah in prophecy. But for a full treatment on this subject, please watch our series Abraham's Descendants, Part 1, 2, and 3. If you have watched our series Abraham's Seed, Part 1, 2, and 3, you learn that Abraham's descendants are actually the Christians. Only the Jews who founded the early Christian church, following the progression of truth, retain the blessing of Abraham and the Holy Spirit. For those who worship God must worship him in spirit and in truth. These Christian Jews, of course, lost their racial identity as they intermarried and were dispersed amongst the Gentiles. But God has kept track of Abraham's bloodline. Remember, God told Abraham that his descendants would be as the sand of the sea. Unfortunately, the Jews now gathering in Palestine, or Israel, do not constitute such a large number. God calls these last-day Christians Judah because at the time of the Messiah's first advent, the two-tribe kingdom of Judah were the only descendants of Abraham present. The 10-tribe kingdom of Israel had already been dispersed and carried away by the Assyrians. It was the Christian Jews from the two-tribe kingdom of Judah who established the Christian church. As an unknown yet large number of Christians are direct descendants of the early Christian church, Christians are by right and by parentage called Judah. God also details how he will clear the land no matter who gathers there, to bring his true worshipers there. This is his kingdom being established, the kingdom of Daniel 2. So God is talking to this vast spread out kingdom the Protestant nations. He calls them Assyria and is also singling out its capital city, Nineveh, in prophecy. Now, if anybody would be the leader or the captain of the Protestant nations today, it would be the United States. So the United States is also singled out in these prophecies. Assyria, the Protestant nations, charges inspiration, is a rejoicing city that dwells carelessly, that says in her heart, I am, and there is none beside me. Zephaniah 2:15. At this point, let us pause for a moment and summarize the characteristics by which this modern Assyria is to be identified. Number 1, as men look at things, she is so great that there is none like her. She is well instructed in the things of God. Number 2, she is an oppressive, hard ruling nation. Number 3, she has polluted the sanctuary and has declared the law of God void. Number 4, she has piled up wealth by going after it as an evening wolf goes after its prey. Number 5, she harbors the church of God. Number 6, she exists in the time the Lord is to manifest his power and destroy all the wicked nations. Number 7, she is an Assyria-like nation, widespread, a nation of conquest. There is but one people under the sun that answers to all these descriptions, and that is, of course, the English-speaking people in whose midst is the church, and from whose midst the gospel and the Bible flow out to all nations. As clear as language can make it, the burden of the prophet Zephaniah is for the English-speaking Christian world. Now, because of lack of time, I suggest that you read Zephaniah 1, 2, and 3, and also Nahum 1, 2, and 3 for the completion of this study. We will start with Nahum chapter 3. Nahum chapter 3 tells more of the fall and judgment of Assyria and Nineveh. If you read both Nahum and Zephaniah, chapters 1, 2, and 3, you will see that they are interconnected. While Zephaniah gives us details of who is involved and their fate, Nahum tells more of the conflict and concentrates on Nineveh. Actually, if you look at the whole book of Nahum, it says it is the burden of Nineveh. So it specifically tells about Assyria, the Protestant nations, and Nineveh, the USA's involvement in the last great conflict. The burden of Nahum and Zechariah. In Nahum chapter 2 and Zechariah chapter 14, God gives us the details of this gigantic war and describes it as one that occurs when the chariots shall rage in the streets and when they shall jostle against each other in the broad ways and seem like lightning. These indisputable clues cement that this war's fulfillment is in modern times. We will see that this gigantic war, which will surround Jerusalem, actually starts because of the conditions World War II caused. It will continue in the near future because only half of the scriptures have been fulfilled. The first half of Nahum's chapter 2's prophecy met its fulfillment with World War II and Hitler. Hitler was the he that dasheth in pieces, who stumbled his walk by waging war with Russia and in North Africa instead of finishing his domination of Europe and Great Britain. World War II was the first world war that was fought in majority by highly mechanized war machines, such as planes, tanks, and automobiles. But Hitler did not fulfill verses 6 through 13. Therefore, someone else must arrive, a second he that dasheth in pieces, to finish the prophesied job. This will happen when World War II is resumed. Nahum chapter 1 talks of the armament of the U.S. and her allies during this last conflict. Verses 10 and 11 say, "For while they be folden together as thorns, united with others to protect themselves, and while they are drunken as drunkards, filled with theory, they shall be devoured as stubble fully dry, as when a fire sweeps through it. There is one come out of thee, out of a nation characterized by ancient Assyria, that imagineth evil against the Lord, a wicked counselor. Thus saith the Lord, though they be quiet and likewise many, yet thus shall they be cut down, when he that dasheth in pieces shall pass through." It is then that Nahum 2 verses 6 through 13 must be fulfilled. "The gates of the rivers shall be opened, and the palace shall be dissolved, and Huzzab shall be led away captive. She shall be brought up, and her maids shall lead her as the voice of doves, tabering upon their breasts. But Nineveh is of old like a pool of water, yet they shall flee away. Stand, stand, shall they cry, but none shall look back. Take ye the spoil of silver, take the spoil of gold, for there is none of the store and glory out of all the pleasant furniture. She is empty and void and waste, and the heart melteth, and the knees smite together. And much pain is in all loins, and the faces of them all gather blackness. Where is the dwelling of the lions, and the feeding place of the young lions, where the lion, even the old lion, walked, and the lions whelp, and none made them afraid? The lion did tear in pieces enough for his whelps, and strangled for his lionesses, and filled his holes with prey, and his dens with ravin. Behold, I am against thee, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will burn her chariots in the smoke, and the sword shall devour thy young lions, and I will cut off thy prey from the earth, and the voice of thy messengers shall be heard no more." We know that this war is going to be a troubling time, because the Bible talks in other places about a famine, and it also says the daughters of Zion, that their men will die in this war. That is, any unconverted man in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and there will be a draft, there will be a mandatory draft for this war, simply because of the magnitude of it. Any unconverted man will fall in this war. Now, why does this happen? The Bible says it's because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walking with outstretched necks. They perform, so to say. They're only worried about the love of display and looking good. And we have to look at, where are we at as a church, where our influence as women only causes our husbands or sons to be lost. Dress reform is a foundational block of reform in the Adventist church, but we have drifted away from it. How can we, as Adventists or even Christians, influence those across the world that are heathens, that do not know Jesus, when we are dressed like we are for the streets? I'm sorry, ladies, I had to say it. When we are dressed like we are for the streets. Dressing inappropriately can effectively kill our witness, and it dishonors God, and in this case, it's the reason why our men fall in the war. So this brings us to the time of Daniel 11:45, where the USA, the last king of the north, comes to his end. At some point in time, As the saints are brought to the Holy Land for refuge from the 7 last plagues, the king of the north will plant tabernacles of his palace, which are perhaps a branch of his government, between the 2 seas, the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, possibly on Mount Sinai. In Daniel 11:45, the Bible says that the last king of the north, the USA, will come to its end, meaning it will lose the war. It also says that none shall help him, meaning that allies will not come through to help him in his time of defeat. The king of the north, whose tradition usually is to stand and fight, is to leave the Holy Land he has previously occupied. He loses Palestine, or the state of Israel, because God has purposed it. He has cleared the land for his saints. This will take us to the end of the leopard-like beast phase, because Michael stands up and rescues the faithful in the church, as we previously went over. Now, this is very important. If you haven't watched our Kingdom of Daniel 2 video, make this the very next video you watch. This will explain what the kingdom is, where it will be established, and why it has to be established. Also, stay tuned for our next study, the entrance of the scarlet-colored beast, the man 666, and the false prophet. If you like this study, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button. God bless.